Hey, Slick Talkers, thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. And I know that if you love this show, you'll also love my morning show called Good Morning Hospitality with my co hosts Michael Golden and Brandy Canali, as we spend 30 minutes every Monday morning to dive into the industry's top latest news and trending topics. So go check it out on wherever you find your podcasts at Good Morning Hospitality. And you can live stream with us on Monday mornings on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and of course, YouTube. Now, I hope you enjoy this episode.
To continue that over the next, 3 to 5 years, acquisition has to start and become a part of that. If you want to keep that pace up, if you don't want to keep up a 2 or 3x pace, then, acquisition doesn't need to be on the radar. You can keep going on that organic growth rate. But also back to with that group structure, we've got our margin is vertically integrated, right? So all of those different services provide mean that we could be relatively cost effective in each of them and build our margin as we go through the services. But it also means that we can cross sell, which actually plays nicely into the acquisition model. So if you take our recent Wholesale Simple acquisition, 120 managed properties in Liverpool, as soon as we bought that business in, they were using an external provider on interior design. So straight away, that bolts into our interior design business. So acquisition also makes sense that when we look at an acquisition, we're not just looking at that acquisition for purely what they do. We're looking at what other services we can bolt in from our group offerings that actually makes it more valuable.
You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. All right, Nathan, welcome back. Round two, minute with minute. And I have some questions on the update features with the devices from Gen 2 to now Gen 3.
Yeah, good question, Will. So, first and foremost, the device is now weatherproof, so you can place it indoors or outdoors, which is great. It's the same device either way, so you can order as many devices as you need and decide where to place them later. When you're installing it in the mobile app, it's going to ask you if you're putting it indoors or outdoors, and then you just pick which one makes the most sense for your situation. Also, we've been able to build in a couple of things in this new unit that allow us to expand on the capabilities. So, the big one being cigarette detection at the moment.
I love it. All right, you heard it here first. Another minute with minute, and now back to the episode. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this episode is about to be a little mind blowing for you, for all of us in the vacation rental space. I am here with Dale Smith, who is just an incredible entrepreneur in our industry. I actually didn't even get to like really know of you and everything that you've built until we met in Barcelona at Scale. And we were on stage with Steve Davis and talking about, you know, what the next 5 years of short-term rentals looks like. And man, to hear your story, I could see it playing a big role, or at least you playing a big role in it. So, Dale, before I butcher your introduction and everything else, I would love to know, where does everything start for you? And welcome to the show,
Cool.
by the way.
No, thanks. No, thank you for having me. Well, looking forward to it. Yeah, so journey for me started back in 2017, which was when we bought our first vacation rental, right? So prior to that, our background was in buy to let property, which, in the US, I think you guys call like multifamily rentals. So that was where the property bug started, if you like. I studied finance and marketing at uni, really enjoyed the sales and marketing side of things. So for me, the vacation rentals was putting the property piece and the sales and the marketing piece together. And that's what got me hooked. So with that first vacation rental in 2017, that obviously has evolved pretty quickly over the last 5 years. So we've gone from that one property to over 900 that we now manage under our host and stay brand. So it's been pretty quick and exciting growth. And yeah, I'm just really passionate about the industry. I love what the industry's done the last sort of 5 years. We're on a great trajectory, and yeah, I'm really excited about what the future holds.
I love it. And to dive in a little bit deeper beyond kind of what you've been doing in the short-term rental space, give us some context just growing up. Obviously, 0 to 900 properties under management is no joke. Like it's a big deal, especially in Europe. I think, you guys are making some waves as we just saw at the time of this recording. It's July 25th, and I saw yesterday or the day before, July 24th, you guys announced an acquisition of another property management company out in England, I believe. And if not England, correct me.
Yeah, no, that's right. In Liverpool, in England. Yeah.
Okay, so, you have this incredible success, and I wanna know who was Dale, growing up prior to
Yeah.
all of this? Was business always in the blood?
Sports was definitely always in the blood, and I think business has kind of come into it off the back of that. So, growing up, I played football or soccer, and I played for a team called Middlesbrough, who's a professional team. So I played in their junior academy from being 8 to 13 years old. So football was like my life up until that point. I had no other aspirations apart from professional soccer player. That changed a bit when I was 13. I broke my leg. I had a pretty bad break in a game. That ended my football career, but in the 12 months prior to that, I'd started to play quite a bit of golf. My family all play golf, also soccer family as well. So I'd started to get the golf bug a little bit. So thankfully I was able to transfer from soccer to golf, and my golf escalated pretty quickly. I ended up playing international golf for England when I was 16. That enabled me to get a scholarship in the US. So I actually studied at the University of San Diego. So
Mm.
I did 4 years, lived the dream in San Diego, California for 4 years, perfect weather every day. I think I saw a week's worth of rain in 4 years. So did that and then finished university at USD in 2010, which my aspirations at that point in time were actually to stay in the US. I'd studied finance and marketing. So I really wanted to actually get into the financial services sector. That's what I thought I wanted to do. Golf, although I enjoyed the golf, it was one for me where I didn't necessarily see that as my be all and end all, and going down that route of, trying to make it pro and the tour pro, there's quite a lot of sacrifice in that. And a lot of the guys who do that have succeeded, it's kind of all they're destined for that. It's all they're ever going to do. Where for me, it was a big part of my life, but I also had other things and other aspirations and other things that I could do. So I came back to the UK in 2010. Would love to have stayed in the US, but we all know recessionary time at that point was not the easiest in terms of being able to stay and get a job as an international student. So came back to the UK and then went into the motor industry. So my family background is actually automotive. So I'd never get into that industry, thought I would do something different. But at that point in time, it was kind of a common thread for me and kind of following my dad a little bit. So got into the motor industry. And at that point in time, as I was working full time, my dad and I started investing in property together. So that's what got us started on that property journey. So really the first thing for me was probably buying around 2012, 2013. So a few years of building that buy to let multifamily portfolio before then moving into vacation rental full time in 2017. But prior to that, in the commercial sector, in the automotive, I ended up working for a company called Peter Vardy. Peter's father was one of the biggest automotive entrepreneurs in Europe. He built one of the biggest automotive retailers in Europe called Reg Vardy PLC. So I had a great mentor there, and I progressed pretty well through that business. I started in the marketing department. I left the business in 2017 as commercial director. So there's loads of things that I learned from Peter really as a mentor that I now apply in our business on a daily basis, and that have, enabled and facilitated, lots of the things we do today that I learned, doing that job and kind of being given those opportunities and experiences that have really helped us grow what we've done in the last 5 years from a horse and stay wider group perspective as well. So hopefully that's a bit of a whistle
Love
stop
it.
to it.
I love it. No, that's great, and it gives me a bunch of touch points to kind of hit along the way. So, going into family business, automotive, and kind of following your dad, like you said a little bit, what were you hesitant with that at all? Were you like, "Oh, I really wanna do something," but just with the circumstances at hand, you had to kinda go down that route?
Yeah, it was kind of, coming back in 2010, it was an opportunity. It was an opportunity to get into a sector that I already knew, right? I'd grown up around it. Like, so you naturally learn things during your childhood and listening to conversations. My first job was being out on the forecourts, valeting cars and cleaning cars. So you've been around it. So you pick lots of different things up from it. So I never thought about really going into that industry because it was what my dad did, and I wanted to do something different. but it was an opportunity for me to get into an industry that I did know and actually progress pretty quickly, which gave me, I had lots of really good earning potential as a young guy, which then enabled me to do what we've done from a property point of view. So it was a great opportunity, although, on paper, if you said to me, it certainly wasn't top of the list, let's say that. But yeah, I loved my time in the automotive industry, and I still do. I still speak to lots of people in it. It's really fast paced industry, tight margins, loads of great learning points that anyone wanting to grow a business or, operate a business at scale, the automotive sector has got so many key learnings in it that if you can operate an automotive business, you can operate probably, just about any business, I would say.
I love that. And touching into mentorship, you mentioned, getting mentored through that kind of shift in your career. And I always love looking back and reflecting on the moments where I had a really close mentor. Shout out to Mark Crawford, who really took me under his wing. I was not doing well as a young man. I made a lot of hard life choices and had to suffer the consequences of that. But being able to be kind of taken in like that and have that mentorship obviously is probably a little bit different from everybody else's experience with mentorship in
Mhm.
either currently or in the past. But what was that mentorship like for you, and how big of an impact has that had into what you have in your business today?
Massive. Well, to be honest, I've got three people I would classify as like the key mentors to me, in the past, but still are today as well. So my dad's massive from that point of view, and my dad's still, although he's not as active day to day in our business now, he is still my sounding board on a lot of things. We disagree on lots of things, but he's always my yardstick on reality. We have a conversation. I'll go away and think, right, he's not right on that bit, but that bit and that bit he is right. So I need to take action on that, or I need to do something about that. So, he is number one from that point of view. My college golf coach. So I was lucky enough to be coached by a guy called Tim Mickelson, which is Phil Mickelson's brother. Tim now caddies for Phil on tour, has been with him for about 4 years, 5 years, I think. He was my college golf coach. We built a great relationship. I was the first international student Tim had recruited into that USD golf program. So, you know, it was kind of a stepping stone for him and something new for him as well as for me at the same time. So, we built a pretty strong bond on the golf front, but, as friends and for him as a mentor to me, but also from a business point of view as well. He's always been involved, always been interested, sorry, from a business perspective. And Tim has been a big advocate and support of me and our business as well. And I continue to speak to Tim pretty much on a weekly, if not a weekly, then certainly a monthly basis. I was with him last week at the British Open, and we spent a bit of time together before that as well. So he's been influential and continues to be. And then the third is Peter, who was my chief exec in the Peter Vardy business. But again, we still speak on a regular basis, meet up each quarter, really just to talk out about our businesses. So from each of those different mentors, I've had and still have today, every one of them brings a bit of a different perspective and different skill sets to it. When you put all of that together, I've been really lucky in terms of the people that I've been able to lean upon for that guidance and that mentorship. But, I can't stress enough how important it is to have those people. And I guess, they're not, I've had people in the past where I've been kind of being assigned mentors or given mentors at a certain point in time. But for me, they serve maybe a certain purpose at a certain point. I think it's those people who are inspirational in your life as a whole that are the ones that are ultimately key. And I could go on with other parts of family and friends that all play a role, but those three people have been instrumental so far and hopefully will continue to be.
Well, it's difference between, I think, like the assigned mentor, right? And then the intentional mentor, the one that kind of
Yeah.
comes in and just doesn't, it's not told to be there for you and be like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to help you guide along. Like it just kind of happens, right? It just is,
Yeah.
it's intentional. The relationship, it starts on a different foot. It feels more natural where they're showing kind of a little bit of vulnerability, saying, hey, like, here's a little bit about what I've experienced. Let me pass this on to you. And you get to kind of take that and process it how you will. And it's a really interesting piece and just something I love talking about. But with your business now, and so going into the SDDE Smith Group and Host and Stay, give us a kind of a give us a high level overview because I want to dive into like 2017 when you first started buying multifamily, or I forget what you labeled it, but
Like
when you
bats. Yeah.
start yeah. So when you start investing in properties to then now having this huge, incredible portfolio, I would love to just kind of hear like the high level view for the listeners, and then we can unpack it from little
Yeah,
pieces along the way. Yeah.
yeah, completely. So 2017 was when we bought that first vacation rental, and that was again by chance. So it was in our hometown place called Saltburn in North Yorkshire, right on the North Yorkshire coast in England. And really, we bought that property because it needed significant refurbishment, but the location was fantastic. And at the time, we weren't buying it to be a vacation rental, just because of its position and the fact that we're looking at it and thinking, right, if that was a multifamily property, are we really going to get as much revenue out of it as what we feel like it deserves? So for me at the time, it was just a matter of, using my kind of marketing knowledge and background and saying, right, well, actually, can we get that up, throw that up on Airbnb and Booking.com and start to generate some bookings and really see where we go with it. If it doesn't work, we can always then flip back to our standard buy-to-let / multifamily model. But if it does work, does that unlock the door to a new path for us and of trying to generate higher revenues out of our portfolio? So that was kind of the turning point for us. And at that time, there was a number of what I would call traditional vacation rental managers in the space that offered a certain element of solution on managing that vacation rental. And when I spoke to those guys that came out and saw the property, I was quite underwhelmed with what they provided as a service. So, they would generate a booking. When that booking got to the property, that the kind of remit on that booking would then fall to us as the owners of the property to be the person that if the guest had an issue, they needed to ring us. They wouldn't manage the housekeeping for me, but they could recommend someone and put me in touch with someone. The same on the maintenance side of things. So it was a really disjointed process, but they also wanted to charge like 18 or 20% plus VAT for providing, in my mind, what was the easiest part of the service. The most difficult part is, right, when that guest shows up and you got to then deliver an experience, make sure it's clean, make sure it's changed over and maintained. That's the hard work, right? So it felt like there was a gap in the market for a management product. So between 2017 and the end of 2018, we added another vacation rental property to our own, owned portfolio. But then we started to manage other vacation rentals for friends of friends, and also two clients who were actually came off a podcast that I did back in the early days off the back of that project. And we had two clients that came to us that said, look, we want to invest in vacation rental properties, but we don't know where to start. Like, they both actually were expats. One, I think both in Dubai at the time, actually an airline pilot and a military guy. So we facilitated that for them. We found them the property. We worked out what we thought the financials would be. We designed the interiors of the property. We refurbished it. We furnished it. And then we put it on Booking.com, put it on Airbnb, and we charged a management fee for doing that. But we managed all of it for them. So it was completely hands off for them. So that's what got started in terms of what our product is today, that full hands-off management piece, right? So any owners that come to us, if they don't want to get involved, they don't have to get involved. We will manage every single aspect. They get their invoice and their statement at month end, and we disperse the funds to them. Like, that's our perfect client from that point of view. So, in the years preceding that, we built up the group and the host and stay brand to be able to facilitate that at scale. So what we could do between myself, my mum, my dad, and my sister 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we've scaled into, multiple different brands, all delivering different parts of that process. So December 2018 is kind of the starting point for us when we said, right, let's create a brand, which was the birth of our host and stay brand. 9 properties under management, or 7 under management, 2 that we owned. And that was us kind of saying, right, let's go after this. We think we've got something different. Let's try and build out that management portfolio, obviously with a focus in the north of England to begin with, but knowing over the longer term, we want to grow that solution out across the rest of the UK. And now our perfect client ultimately is somebody where we can find the right property for them. We can do that due diligence. We can handle the legal process. We can do the interior design, the refurbishment, and then it passes to host and stay then for the ongoing management. So if we take what is now the SDD Smith Group, we are 12 customer-facing brands, all that do a certain part of that process. So they're all interlinked. They're all a certain part of that chain as that client passes through each of those different services. So they all sit under that group architecture. The businesses all liaise with one another on it. But we've developed it that way, one, so that we can continue to scale the model, but also each of those brands has to stand on their own 2 feet as well. So if you take Styled, which is our interior design business, Styled delivers, lots of projects for homeowners that have a vacation rental property that will end up on the host and stay portfolio. But we also have clients that, will never be on host and stay, and they might be using another agent. It might be a residential property. It might be a commercial property. We're doing a commercial fit out project for Middlesbrough Football Club at the moment. We're doing a 7-figure refurbishment of their entire hospitality floor. So, that brand has evolved from providing a service for, a small number of host and stay owners several years ago into being, a business in its own right and standing on its own 2 feet and bringing clients into group through that channel. So we're always looking to say, right, where is a client? What's an entry point into group for us? How do we get them on that journey? And then also, where have we got exit points? Because if we've got an exit point on the journey, then at some point in time, we need to plug that and bring that business in-house. So, as an example of that, at the moment, we don't do mortgages, we don't do insurance, we use third-party broker providers. But it makes sense. So we've got that captive market at a certain point in time that really should fit within group if we're going to create this holistic, one fits it, not one size fits all, but this kind of end-to-end solution so a client can stay with our group all the way through the process. So that's how things have kind of evolved into this, multi-branded wider group. But host and stay and the 900 holiday homes that we currently have are kind of the epicenter of what the group's all about. The vast majority of stuff will revolve around us trying to provide that end-to-end service for that host and stay client.
There's so much to unpack, and you and I got to talk about this on our pre-chat a little while ago. But, building a business is hard. Building 12 businesses under one is even harder. So
Yeah,
I'm curious, how do you manage all of this? I know it started out 5 or 6 years ago with being a family thing, and I think when you start out, everyone can kinda do everything, right? Like,
yeah,
everyone's
yeah,
kinda got their hand in the pie, but now you're at such a scale, serving 900 homes, plus having the businesses be all standalone by themselves.
yeah, yeah.
How? How is that possible? Like, I'm sure a listener could be like, "Holy crap, like, I can't even, take vacation for myself after one business." So, I'm sure, like,
Yeah,
this has just gotta be mind-blowing for them.
totally. I suppose I've broken the rule of keeping the main thing, but
No, I
they
love it.
kind of there's method in the madness, I suppose, Will, from it, and that's the thing with the vast majority of those businesses have evolved out of something we were doing in that host and stay business. So I'll use the interior design example again. So at, at a certain point in time, myself and Rach, my wife, we were doing all of the interior design projects on a night, like knocking together, Canva boards or PowerPoint boards, creating PDFs, send them to clients with lists of, the items on them, adding a markup and a consultancy fee to that. So once that volume got too much for me, we recruited 2 people in interior designers who needed to do that part of the process. So that was a matter of recruiting in the right personnel, developing a process around what we were already doing, and then passing that part of the business to them to say, right, you now need to deliver that. We were already doing it, so we didn't need to make that up. We'd already gone through the part of kind of making it up as we'd gone along. We then had a process that we could transfer to a new colleague in the business to then create that department, if you like. And then ultimately, once the volume picked up further from that point of view with those 2 designers, that's when we said, right, okay, let's now spin this as an outward facing brand. So it's no longer a host and stay service for host and stay owners. We've got scale, we've got expertise now in doing it. Let's flip that to an outward facing brand and actually try and bring clients into group through that as a channel. And ultimately, what we do now, you can apply that to each part of what we do. The same with the construction business we have, again, a lot of owners that come on host and stay wanted refurbishments. My dad always ran that side of the business. One of our first employees was a guy called Callum. He learned with my dad in terms of the project management side of that kind of residential refurbishment. And then a good friend of mine, we brought in as managing director of the commercial side of the business once we were ready to really scale that. And again, now Callum manages all of the residential. Gary runs that overall business, and we've also moved into commercial construction as well, because that's where Gary's background is. So most of what we do is evolved with one of the family members doing that job to a certain point, making sure we've got a process around it, we know what we're doing around it, and then recruiting in somebody to then take that over from us and then start to run with that. So up until the start of this year, so the beginning of 2023, our kind of high level board was ultimately still really myself, my dad, and then Ben, who's my brother-in-law, who was finance director, now commercial director. That was, kind of the senior people running the business. This year we brought external people plus promoted some people into other roles to really expand out that experience at board level so we can go on that next step of the journey. Because ultimately it's trying to create those different layers or create those different ratios so that we can then scale it out. Ultimately, I'm not going to say that I still run around like an idiot, right? Like I'm definitely not out of that phase that I'm not doing anything, but I love it. That'll probably be always the case for me. I'll always run around like an idiot. There's always something else to do. There's always something not right that could be done better, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I love about it and what I'm passionate about. But I think it's kind of getting right. If you're doing something today, you got to get that documented, process driven, systemized as much as you can, then hand that off to somebody else, which is going to give you that time back to then build the next layer and repeat that and then build the next layer and the next layer. I think that's absolutely key. As long as you're involved in the day to day nitty gritty, you're never going to get above that and be able to scale up the business. And then it's kind of that balance. I'll always say to the guys, like, if something's broken or you can't figure out where it's broken, what you need to do, that's kind of where I fit in. So even if they kind of know what the process is, but they can't quite figure it out, that's what I'm saying, guys, right, get me in, because those are the kind of the huddles of the meetings I want to have, because I would hopefully quite quickly be able to figure that out, take it away, fix it, get the process in and hand that back in something they can then move forward with. So it's all these little building blocks that you're trying to build upon, but it's then being able to get the structure in behind that. And ultimately, I suppose the last point on it is I've always tried, certainly in recent years, to recruit ahead of what we think the growth trend is going to be. So, and that's a bit risky in the sense of, with our two interior designers, when we brought those in, we really needed one at the time, but out of the ones we interviewed, two were really good. So we thought, right, well, tell you what, let's have two and let's build the volume. So I'm always a believer of, if we put the resource in and we've got the right people, we'll find a way of getting the sales on to then bring us up to that. And it enables us to scale faster, where if we're trying to scale with reduced resource, we're never going to be able to realize our full potential. I would much rather have it the other way and be a little bit over resourced and bring the revenue level or the sales rate up to where it needs to be to satisfy that. And that's kind of maybe a personal driver to me. That's what pulls me along. Think, right, we've got to get to that point, because if we don't, then I've not got a job for somebody. So
Yeah, you got payroll to make, so
yeah,
obviously you gotta get the revenue and the sales in there. I love it.
yeah.
There's a couple things that we can obviously keep diving into. I think the way you described all that was awesome, and it's something I think a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, have a hard time because they're so in the day to day. Hearing that could be inspirational enough to start hopefully giving them the ability to step back and review. You know, with the announcement of your guys' recent acquisition, I would love to
Mhm.
know around the question of acquisitions in general. How do you guys get, obviously you're performing at a volume of revenue that's way higher than when obviously you started 5 years ago or 6 years ago. But
Yeah.
when it comes to acquisition pieces, obviously there's a multiple applied to the price, there's revenue driven, like there's a lot of numbers and math and kind of valuation stuff that goes behind it.
Yeah.
So, when do you know when you're ready for an acquisition? Because obviously you can grow naturally and
Mhm.
scale as a natural entity, but
Yeah.
adding that absorption piece obviously adds a lot to it. So, how when do you decide to acquire or just continue to grow and scale naturally?
I think it probably depends on, well, it depends on where you are on the journey. I suppose it's determining what that journey is going to be. So if we take, I always have to work these numbers backwards. So if you take 2022 for us, so we have financial years or it's calendar year, because I always have to have it January to December, a bit OCD like that. So our 2022 financial year, we did just over 16 million in revenue across the group, across our different services. And 2022 was pretty much a year of no acquisitions really for us. We did our first acquisition as a group business October 2022. So prior to that, our growth was purely organic, and that acquisition was on our legal side of the business. So our legal firm that we started in 2020, we'd grown to 12 people and 2 offices. So the acquisition doubled our size to 4 offices and 25 people, and brought us some more experience into the business. So So 2022, 16 million organic growth. We've been 2 to 3x in a year. So a year prior to that, we were about 7 million in terms of revenue. And year before that, we were in 2 million in terms of revenue. So for me, it was kind of, how do we maintain, between a 2 and 3x revenue growth year on year organically? So we probably could have squeezed double growth this year from 16 to just over 30 million. Our budget this year is just over 30 million. But to continue that over the next, 3 to 5 years, acquisition has to start and become a part of that. If you want to keep that pace up, if you don't want to keep up a 2 or 3x pace, then, acquisition doesn't need to be on the radar. You can keep going on that organic growth rate. But also back to with that group structure, we've got our margin is vertically integrated, right? So all of those different services provide mean that we could be relatively cost effective in each of them and build our margin as we go through the services. But it also means that we can cross sell, which actually plays nicely into the acquisition model. So if you take our recent Wholesale Simple acquisition, 120 managed properties in Liverpool, as soon as we bought that business in, they were using an external provider on interior design. So straight away, that bolts into our interior design business. So acquisition also makes sense that when we look at an acquisition, we're not just looking at that acquisition for purely what they do. We're looking at what other services we can bolt in from our group offerings that actually makes it more viable. So the reason for us going down the route of acquisition is purely to keep up that growth pace. And we've got ambitions really we want to be at 100 plus million in terms of group revenue by the end of 2025. So our acquisitions are to drive it along to that. And we want to be at 5,000 properties on the host and stay portfolio by the end of 2025 as well, which is again where acquisition has to play into that. We think organically we'll get to about 2,500. So those other 2,500 units to go on top of that, we need to acquire in the form of other management businesses. So that's where the logic comes from our side. And that's playing into that kind of that medium term plan of hitting those certain objectives that we want to hit. And ultimately, when we look at acquisitions, for us, we've done a couple of different acquisitions. So we did the legal business, which was a full share purchase of that business and that entity. We've done a couple of asset purchases of smaller businesses at the early part of this year, and then the Wholesale Simple acquisition was the first one for us in the host and stay management space. But that will be the primary route or the primary acquisition channel for us going forward. We've got a number in the pipeline at the moment that are progressing. So hopefully there'll be plenty more of that type of news coming out from the host and stay camp in terms of us acquiring other like for like businesses that'll enable that growth. And ultimately what we're looking for on that front is as a brand, we're full management service. So it's got to be key that those businesses we're looking to acquire fit into that same full management model. Again, we're looking for the right type of property. So we only really play in the 4-star and 5-star space. So top 25% of the market in terms of property quality. So again, we're looking for portfolios that we can acquire that fit that. And then ultimately we're looking at different models. So, is it a multiple of EBITDA? Is it, X number of pounds per managed contract? When we're looking at an opportunity, we're looking at a number of different metrics to decide on what we see the value of that business being. Because again, every business is different. So you're trying to find the right balance, and ultimately you're trying to find the right number that works for us and works for that current business owner ultimately.
All right, Slick Talkers, now for another dynamic sponsored duo of the podcast. I would love to introduce you to Vintory and Safely. About Vintory, we've had Brooke Flotz on the podcast, who is the founder, multiple times, and him and his team know numbers. They know data and they know marketing. They know how to help property managers just like you scale and grow their business by adding more inventory, aka more homes, into your rental program that drive the bottom line. For all of you listeners that want to learn how to scale and grow your inventory, you can get a free digital copy of Brooke's book called From 0 to 500 Properties in 5 Years. And for an added bonus, if you would do a demo of the Vintory platform, you'll get a $50 gift card to Amazon. Now that's a sick deal. And now to touch on our friends at safely.com. Safely.com helps property managers just like you and I protecting the homes that they manage from structural damage to content damage and, of course, bodily injury. This means plates, linens, cups, couches, tables, curtains, walls, and, of course, your guests themselves are protected. And this helps you by scaling your company in order to ensure that you are retaining owners and inventory in your program. If anything is broken or if anyone is hurt, you are able to make a claim through Safely, and within 3 business days, you can get instantly paid out to replace any items and settle any claims that happen on site without having to deduct from your owner's payouts. That's why I call these guys the dynamic sponsor duo. And thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. Check out their offers in the show notes, and back to the episode. Definitely. And forgive me for not going into the details of the announcement this week, but do you, when the host so simple one, let's use that as an example,
Yeah.
if you're able to, do
Mhm.
you approach it just as the contracts, or you end up, is it like an acqui-hire as well, where you absorb the founders of the team and other things
Yeah.
like that, and kind of the liabilities with them? Or yeah, just
Yeah.
kind of maybe walk me through.
Yeah, so that acquisition is full acquisition, so, full entire share purchase of that existing entity. So contracts, the people, assets, liabilities, so everything that comes with it. The two founders in that business, Joe and Katie, young couple, built a fantastic business from they started that business in college, and those guys are, still sub 30 at the moment. So, and they're going to stay with us the next couple of years as well. So for me, that acquisition brings with it two entrepreneurs that know how to grow a short-term rental management business, which is a difficult thing to do. They were running it full management with in-house housekeeping team, same as what our philosophy is, in-house maintenance team. So, ultimately, if you put the two businesses together, we were so aligned on so many different aspects of it. It was a great fit for us, and geographically, it was a really good fit for us in terms of how England is built between, East Coast to West Coast in England is like 3 hour drive, right? So it's not very wide. So with us being focused mainly on the Northeast and those guys in the Northwest, it enabled us to kind of join the two areas up and give us breadth of coverage across the north of England, which was positive as well. And as I say, with Joe and Katie staying on, we've got those guys plus all of the existing team to bring to our business, which will just give us another platform for growth. Because ultimately, those guys, even over and above us, probably had even more resource in 100 property business than what we would have had. So we've got resource there that will enable us to pretty much treble that portfolio from 100 to 300 in Liverpool, hopefully pretty quickly. With now, with how we're kind of marketing budgets and process and systems behind it, hopefully we'll be able to start and move the needle and actually then grow those businesses organically. So what we're looking for is, if we can acquire a management business in a certain area, we then want to scale that business up with our knowledge and our spending power, etc.
Wow. And because I don't get to talk to entrepreneurs like you often. I get to talk to a lot of cool people, obviously, but to get to this scale, and that's no dig to any past guests. So if you're a past guest listening to this episode, don't think I'm coming at you. But this is it's such a different way of thinking, because so often we're told, be niche, go down, just do what works, don't expand into other things or other verticals, and just put your head down and grind and build out that one thing that makes it all, whatever, worth it. But you're able to then acquire a company and immediately have a profitable impact based off of the services and other brands and businesses inside the group, that day one, they're already turning a bigger profit, hopefully, than when the day you acquired them the day before.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, is just so, 30, that's like 30,000-foot view versus like the 3,000-foot view. And so, going into a kind of a question I wanted to save towards the end, and I told you every guest leaves a question for the next guest, and
Yep.
I normally save this for the end, but I think this applies perfectly for what you and I have talked about on stage
Hmm.
at scale and
Yep.
how this question was phrased. So if you're okay with it, I'm gonna kinda hit you with a fast one,
Yeah,
all
go
right?
for it. Yep.
All right. So this one is from Travers, who manages about 50 vacation rentals in Nashville.
Okay.
And he wanted to know, he said, what do you think the future of this industry looks like? And how do you how do you plan to be successful in that future that you see? And this kind of goes in that conversation. What's the 5 year,
Yeah.
it's 5 years of short term rentals that we get to have with Steve Davis. So Would
Yeah.
love to know kind of where do you guys see yourself, taking this industry, especially in Europe?
Yeah. So I think for me, the key bit on that, where I see it going, is the consolidation. We'll continue to see consolidation in the market. So if you take that, the UK market, we've seen it in in the US as well, with likes of Vacasa, buying up property managers. I think we'll continue to see that consolidation because it seems to get tougher for property managers to actually scale. And I think it seems like there are fewer that really truly want to scale to kind of huge volumes. So I think we'll continue to see that consolidation. But I think one of the key things we see in the industry is that there's lots of fragmentation, and then that kind of plays back to our model. So if you take the standard process, if an investor's buying a vacation rental, they got to go see a realtor and buy that property, right? Then they need to speak to a property manager like us or Vacasa or whoever it is to say, right, I've got this property. Can you tell me how it's going to perform? Then they potentially need to find someone, if it's not already in a state that it can be let, then they need to find someone to refurbish it, someone to design it. Back to then, do they have to then find a housekeeper, maintenance? So as a marketplace, it's a really fragmented journey for a property owner to go through. So that's where, I do believe in that kind of end-to-end solution is what will pave the way for us over the coming years, and us, our will to want to be able to do that. I think one thing we talked about on stage, I see and we hear at conferences and across the industry about the next piece of technology, the next best PMS, the next best, pricing tool, what AI is going to do to customer service. There's loads of that stuff that's going to enhance process, enhance margins, enhance customer service. But then also it comes back down to the people. And the one bit that I believe we miss all of the time and we don't talk enough about is what we're doing around housekeeping and linen and maintaining these properties, because those are the ones that, if anything, are going to stop the growth of our industry. Because if we haven't got a housekeeper to clean the property, then we can't operate. And I see a huge gap in our industry. We've got, again, technology solutions out there trying to bridge some of this gap between on the ground housekeeping supply and property managers. But no one's truly done anything around those on the ground services and actually trying to consolidate and manage those on the ground services, because that's the key to growth in the industry, or growth for a property management point of view, is being able to deliver that. So I see that as our kind of USP over the coming years, is we want to continue to do that. So we look at our current model, we employ over 175 housekeepers directly, like they're on our payroll, paid by us on a weekly basis. We will continue to scale that. We have 2 people who all they do all day, every day, is recruit housekeepers. So as we continue to scale our business, that 175 employed will become 250, 500, 1,000. They'll become it already is the biggest employee department in our business. But we seem to, as an industry, it seems to get left out all the time. And it's actually the hardest part of what we do. The problem is it's not quite as nice and cool and shiny and glamorous as all the rest of it. So I think in terms of that, we will see that consolidation. I think we'll see something happen around that space. We have to, because we're seeing unit count increase, but resource on the ground is getting harder. So we're going to see something happen at that point in time. There's going to come a tipping point. And then also, as we know, regulation is coming our way across the industry and globally. Obviously, we've got different spins on it in different regions, but I think it's actually a good thing for the industry, if I'm honest. I think in terms of that regulation leads to more professionalism, higher barrier to entry, which I think actually is better for all of us in the space from a professional point of view. If it is a little bit tougher for a individual to list a property on Airbnb to rent it to a family, I think that actually is a good thing. Or we do need some regulation licensing that says, look, if you want to let this property, well, you've got to have all these in place. You need to apply. We need to approve you. And then you can have that family stay in your property, because at the moment that barrier to entry is too low. So we do need to see that shift. Potentially it stops the growth of the industry a little bit. I don't think it will. I think we'll just see inventory shift to professional managers, and it will just actually improve the industry as a whole. Hopefully that answers the question. It's a little bit all rounded, I guess, but hopefully that answers it.
No, it's definitely an answer, and an answer I'm excited about, because it wasn't all about the shiny bits and pieces that we all love talking about.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of it, I know, and I want to kind of ask you the question, when it comes to the future of housekeeping and the boots on the ground and the resources there, what are we missing? Because the one thing to kind of like set this question up for you is the one thing I'm seeing is that housekeeping, maintenance, anyone that really is on the ground outside of like guest service and owners, CEOs, CFOs, all the bigger positions, right? They don't listen to podcasts. They don't
Hmm.
listen to conversations like this. They're not attending VRMA or Scale or, it's the owners, the operators, the from like the, C level up or maybe even a couple director of operations, however that looks like. They don't they're not involved in this conversation.
Hmm.
They're talked about, they're in the conversation, but they're not talking, they're not an actual
Yeah.
full-on voice, and you're right, there's companies I know out there that are trying to represent that, but what's really the missing piece in order to make this a holistic, like, all-in-one service and industry when our housekeeping is such a vital point that, like you said, is gonna come to a tipping point, like, as we scale, when they're not part of the
Yeah.
conversation, they're just being
Yeah.
talked about.
Yeah.
What's that missing opportunity that we're not looking
Um,
at?
I think it comes down to the people part of it. Well, really, I think this is applies to our sector, I suppose, but other sectors in general. I think with the journey we've been on, certainly the last decade, with VC capital, private equity capital pumped into businesses that can scale really quickly, I think we get left behind on the people point. We're bothered about, you know, driving revenue as high as possible. We're not bothered about building sustainable businesses, so to speak. I think it stems from that. And I feel like that led us down the path of we forget about business is actually the value, and a lot of the business is actually the people that are in those businesses. And without those people, that business is no longer sustainable. So, which for me then leads back to the controls. So if you take our housekeeping operation, there'd be an argument to say, well, why don't you just outsource that? Well, if I outsource that responsibility, I'm then relying on somebody else to do that recruitment and make sure the quality is right when actually I feel like I'm best placed to control that. Like, so why would I not control that? Yes, potentially in the beginning it's harder work, but it isn't if I actually think through, right, what does it need to be? What does the process need to be? How do I make sure any checks and balances I can put in to mitigate as much risk as possible on a bad clean or whatever it may be? If I do that work up front, it still makes sense for me to kind of hold the cards rather than just giving them to somebody else to hold them, kind of to get it off the desk, if you like. And I think that's the fact is it's, we want to get it off the desk too quickly and pass the remit onto somebody else, which ultimately then gets rid of the control. So I think it's got to be a willingness to actually think, right, if we are a hospitality industry and a hospitality business, then we've got to take responsibility for delivering that service. And actually, for a lot of our guests, the only touch point they have with us as a business is the quality and the standard of that property when they enter it. That's their insight into us as an industry, host and stay as a brand. And ultimately, if I'm not in control of the person that's delivering that, I'm not in control of my brand, I'm not in control of my reputation. I've just outsourced it to somebody else. So that kind of is where I think it stems from. And then ultimately, we need to be willing that we all know that recruitment of human capital at the moment is not easy, but it's not that it can't be done. I think, again, we're looking too much for everyone asks all the time, what's your solution on recruitment or finding people? Well, our solution is that we've got on housekeeping, we've got two people, they're dedicated to it all day, every day. They run adverts, they ring people, they get them in for interview, they then get trained, they go out and clean, and we just rinse and repeat that process. Some days we might get two people, next day we might get four people, but it's the consistency of delivering the process and not thinking, all right, we didn't get 10 there, so let's ditch that process and look for the next solution that might get us something different. It's the consistency, it's the boring bit, I suppose, but it's the boring bit that over time gets the result ultimately and moves us to where we need to be. And I think this isn't us as an industry. I think in general, we're always looking for the solution that gets us there the fastest, but it's not necessarily the kind of the right solution or the sustainable solution. It's the one that we think, all right, yeah, that'll get us there faster, but does it really get us there faster, or does it for a period of time, I guess?
Yeah, and it's funny because you mentioned the word training, right? Like, you got the recruiting, the hiring, the interview, all that stuff, and then the training, and then
Yeah.
off to the job. And so often in our industry, this was my experience at least, I got hired at front desk of a Marriott,
Yeah.
I was on the job for 2 days. That was my training. Off to the wolves you go, and,
Yeah.
you're off, and
Yeah.
that's really it. So, adding the training piece, I think is super important, and, going into kind of the scale that you guys are at, do you find that there 'cause I love the control piece, I think having it in-house is crucial. Where does, I guess, the piece and the connect happen? Because this is a job that it's not glamorous. It sucks.
Mhm.
You're scrubbing toilets, you're on your hands and knees, you're on ladders or stools or whatever, you're doing
Yeah.
laundry. There's bodily fluids involved
Yeah.
sometimes. Like, it's not like all these homes are
Yeah.
perfectly used.
Yeah.
So, making sure the right personality is there. Do you guys have a process of making sure that's when you're hiring the right person on top of all of that? Or
Yeah, completely. So again, that's part of that interview phase. So when we do those phone conversations, so when we get an inquiry in for a housekeeping role, that phone conversation that one of our recruiters has will be, it'll be an honest conversation to say, look, this is what the role actually involves. Because there's no point in us selling the dream, and then when we get to the reality of it, that not being fulfilled, and then ultimately all we do is lose someone that we've spent time on recruiting and training. So we'll be honest and open up front and say, look, this is what the job is. This is what it's going to entail. But we'll also make sure that, we are rewarding, right? So again, our housekeepers can earn more money the longer they've been with us. They can earn more money based on if they keep up a good review rating. So they're incentivized to do that. They can do different shift work as well. So there's lots of variables in it that can incentivize a certain individual to go down that route. And also, again, let's not forget that some people, vast majority of people want to come to work. They want to know what time they're starting, what time they're finishing. And when they go home, they're not thinking about that anymore. And, if you take the housekeeper role, that's perfect for somebody that wants to do that, even versus someone that might be an office based role. Because actually those guys, once they've left work for the day, like they're done completely. So that fits a lot of people in terms of what they're looking for. And also in terms of that recruitment piece, we want to make sure that by someone has started with us and they're out doing their first clean, we've actually given them enough opportunities to kind of exit the process. So they'll do the phone interview, they'll come for their face-to-face interview. When they have the face-to-face interview, they'll go on what we call a trial clean, where they'll go out with one of our head housekeepers. They'll get talked through, right, this is what the job will entail. We'll give them some tasks to do. So again, that creates another barrier. Then they'll have their kind of online training around COSH, which is what materials they can and can't use, can't mix, etc. So there's a number of different things they have to do before they even go out and do that first proper clean. So we've had a number of exit points that if someone isn't going to show up, then we've hopefully given them enough chances to not show up before we get to that first clean. Because again, the reality is, even those that are employed by us in house, every day there's going to be guys and girls that decide, oh, I'm not going in today. So we've got to make sure we've got enough resource to cover that, because that's always going to be an issue. And the same thing, that pool of workers that are typically fit in the profile of our housekeepers, we know that we're probably about 20 to 25% of those guys we're going to be turning at any point in time, because they're going to go off and find another job that pays similar and is a little bit different. But also we know on that kind of wheel, some of those are going to come back to us, because by the nature of what their working habits are, they go and work different places and then they come back round again. So it's understanding all these different factors and keeping the consistency in it to make sure, look, there's no silver bullet. It's about having all these things at play, having the process in place, and that monotonous kind of rerunning all the time of the process to get the desired outcome for us.
yeah, the answer that not everyone probably was expecting or wanting to hear is consistency. So
Yeah,
it's a
completely.
hard one.
Yeah,
It's the one that you know, the more consistent you are, I don't really believe in like the 90-day to break a habit rule where it's like
yeah,
it takes 90 days to break a habit or start a new one. But I think it just takes consistency beyond the
yeah,
90 days in order
yeah,
to really build that,
yeah.
especially in business.
Totally. You
Speaking
can
of
apply that to sales, right? As well. The same thing.
oh yeah,
It's about the activity. You've got it's the consistency of the activity will get the end result. It might not feel like it as you're going through it. Again, we're trying to find that silver bullet answer to get sales on the board, but it's the consistent activity that ultimately then leads to the result. So you're totally right.
exactly. Well, speaking of personalities and the right personality for a housekeeper, I've been wanting to ask you this question. I think I even asked you on our pre-chat too. I've been loving the book called Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman, talking about visionary and integrator. Throughout the episode, you've talked about how you love kind of running around, but also taking something that's broken, fixing it, shifting the process, giving it back, and letting the team run and continue to build that layer. That to me sounds like a very integrator role, but
Yeah.
you also sound like you have a very big vision with the company. So, what would you consider yourself to be, a visionary or an integrator? And what one's more dominant?
I would have said at my core, probably more of an integrator. And certainly that's where I would have said, looking at my kind of my prior roles prior to this business, that's definitely me in terms of getting involved in, right, where's the problems? Let's fix them, pull departments together, pull process together. That's kind of at my core. But what I feel like I've found in terms of when building my own business is having that understanding actually opens up your vision to what the possibilities can be. And I guess
Mm,
that's where I would have said now I can bring the visionary part in of actually knowing, getting a feeling of what's possible, but also kind of pushing the boundaries of going, well, actually, if we can make this work and integrate that piece, then why are we not doing it this way? Or could we do it that way? Which leads into that vision. So I would have said definitely integrate at first, but I think in terms of, any entrepreneur is going to have an element of vision to them, right? That's exactly why
yeah.
they're doing what they're doing. But yeah, integrator at core with a push towards being more visionary really as you get to understand what you can do, what can be done, how far you can push things and thinking differently about things, I think.
I love it. Yeah, I'm opposite visionary at the core with the integrator tendency like, "Oh, I know the vision. Why aren't we just doing these things?" So,
Yeah.
it's very interesting to see the overlap there. And now to close out this episode, if you had one question to leave the next guest on the podcast without knowing who they are, what their background is, what would that question be? Doesn't have to be business related, it could be personal, it could be funny, it could be serious, all the above, but what would that one question be for the next person?
I think probably what do they see as the biggest challenge for the industry over the next 3 to 5 years? Like, what's the one thing that's keeping them up at night in terms of what's coming at us in the next 3 or 5 years from an industry point of view?
I love it. Well, it's perfect. And for all the listeners, if they had one link, which they're not, they're going to get everything for the show notes. But if they had one place, if they wanted to connect with you and get to like learn more about what you guys are building, what would that one place be that you would send them?
Probably LinkedIn. I think definitely look me up on LinkedIn. You'll find me pretty easily and follow us at SDDE Smith Group or Host and Stay on LinkedIn. That's kind of one of our bigger social channels in terms of what we're doing from a business point of view for sure.
You're like the third, maybe fourth person to mention LinkedIn, which
Oh,
is like
really?
my favorite platform. So I'm
Yeah.
thankful that you said that.
No, cool.
I love it. For all you slick talkers out there, make sure you like and subscribe to everything Dale Smith and what they're building at the SSDE group and host and stay company as they are leading the charge for vacation rental leadership and examples in all of the UK and all of Europe. So thank you, Dale, for being on the show again. It's been such an honor to get to chat with you and hear your story. And I look forward to the day we get to have you on for a second time.
Cool. No, thanks for having me, Will. Loved it. Hopefully I'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.